How does a $165 billion handshake turn into a $200 billion nightmare? Money evaporates when boardrooms collide. You know those moments when your credit card declines for a $5 coffee? Now imagine that feeling, but you just spent billions on a company nobody wants. In this video, we'll count down history's most catastrophic corporate purchases, from AOL's Time Warner disaster to Blockbuster laughing Netflix out of the room. Because sometimes the best business lesson is watching someone else burn through more money than you'll ever see. The bigger the checkbook, the harder the fall. In 2001, AOL swaggered into the new millennium with what seemed like digital manifest destiny, purchasing Time Warner for a staggering $165 billion. The deal was hailed as visionary, internet meets old media, except it wasn't. Within 2 years, this corporate marriage imploded spectacularly, hemorrhaging over $200 billion in market value. The dot-com bubble burst, but that wasn't the real problem. These companies were fundamentally incompatible, like trying to merge a rocket ship with a steam engine. AOL's brash tech culture clashed violently with Time Warner's buttoned-up media traditionalists. By the time they divorced in 2009, the deal had become business school shorthand for what were they thinking? The catastrophe forced future mergers to properly assess cultural fit, not just financial projections, proving that sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones we keep forgetting. Yahoo had Microsoft at their door in 2008, checkbook open, offering $44.7 billion for the company. Yahoo's leadership, drunk on hubris and miscalculation, shooed them away like an annoying salesperson. "We're worth more," they insisted. Fast forward 9 years, and Yahoo sold to Verizon for the bargain basement price of $48 billion, a $40 billion discount on Microsoft's original offer. The case was simple: a company overvalued itself. The reason was classic corporate delusion, where executives convinced themselves their struggling business was still in its glory days. The resolution came too late for shareholders, who watched helplessly as Yahoo's market position eroded while Google and Facebook devoured the digital advertising landscape. This cautionary tale now serves as the textbook example of how rejecting a good deal can lead to corporate extinction. The Quaker Oats Company, known for wholesome oatmeal, decided in 1994 that what they really needed was a trendy beverage company. They purchased Snapple for $1.7 billion, convinced they'd struck gold. 27 months later, they unloaded it for just $300 million to Triarch Companies, a staggering $1.4 billion loss. Quaker executives fundamentally misunderstood Snapple's distribution model, which relied on small distributors and convenience stores, not the supermarket channels Quaker dominated. They also butchered Snapple's quirky brand identity with corporate homogenization. The catastrophe forced Quaker to retreat to its core competencies and eventually led to its own acquisition by PepsiCo. The business world still refers to this debacle as Snapple's revenge, a reminder that when acquiring companies, understanding their DNA is as important as reading their financials. eBay's $2.6 billion purchase of Skype in 2005 was the corporate equivalent of buying a flamethrower to toast marshmallows. The online auction giant believed Skype's technology would revolutionize how buyers and sellers communicated, creating magical synergies that would change e-commerce forever. What they got instead was a costly mismatch. It turned out that eBay users were perfectly content using email, and few had any interest in voice-calling random strangers selling collectible teapots. After 4 years of forced marriage, eBay admitted defeat and sold most of its stake back to Skype's founders and investors for $1.9 billion. The fiasco became a cautionary tale about acquiring technology without a clear integration plan. Meanwhile, Microsoft later purchased Skype for $8.5 billion, proving that timing and strategic fit matter more than simply having deep pockets and vague ambitions. In 2005, Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation acquired MySpace for $580 million, convinced they'd purchase the crown jewel of social media. At the time, MySpace dominated the landscape, while Facebook was still a collegiate curiosity. What followed was a masterclass in how to mismanage a digital platform. News Corp smothered the site with advertising, neglected innovation, and failed to understand the evolving social media landscape. Meanwhile, Facebook executed flawlessly, expanding globally while maintaining a clean user experience. By 2011, MySpace had become a digital ghost town, and News Corp unloaded it for a humiliating $35 million, just 6% of what they'd paid. The case demonstrated how quickly digital fortunes can reverse. The reason was corporate arrogance and technological tone deafness, and the resolution was the complete reordering of social media hierarchy that continues to shape our online lives today. Microsoft's 2013 acquisition of Nokia's phone business stands as a $7.2 billion monument to corporate delusion. By the time Microsoft decided to buy Nokia's struggling handset division, the iPhone and Android had already rewritten the rules of mobile computing. Microsoft, desperate to matter in smartphones, believed its Windows Phone operating system paired with Nokia's hardware would create a viable third ecosystem. The case was straightforward. A declining hardware maker met a software giant with mobile ambitions. The reason for failure was equally clear. Consumers had already chosen their platforms. The resolution came swiftly and mercilessly. Microsoft wrote off, essentially the entire purchase price just 2 years later, cutting 7,800 jobs in the process. This catastrophe forced Microsoft to completely rethink its mobile strategy, eventually abandoning its smartphone ambitions altogether to focus on cloud services and software for competing platforms. In 2011, Google decided to go shopping and came home with Motorola Mobility, paying a premium price of $12.5 billion. The search giant claimed it wanted Motorola for its 17,000-plus patents to defend Android against litigation. What it actually got was a struggling hardware business that bled money quarter after quarter. Google tried desperately to make the acquisition work, launching the Moto X phone to modest acclaim but dismal sales. After just 22 months of ownership, Google sold Motorola to Lenovo for $2.9 billion, keeping most of the patents, but taking a $9.6 billion bath on the deal. The case illustrated the perils of defensive acquisitions. The reason was strategic miscalculation about hardware profitability, and the resolution forced Google to rethink its hardware approach entirely. It's a reminder that even the smartest people in the room can make multi-billion-dollar mistakes when venturing outside their core competencies. In 2011, Hewlett-Packard's CEO Leo Apotheker bet the company's future on British software firm Autonomy, acquiring it for $11.1 billion. Within a year, HP had written down $8.8 billion of the purchase price, accusing Autonomy's management of accounting fraud and misrepresentation. The case centered on a desperate tech giant trying to reinvent itself through acquisition. The reason it failed was a perfect storm of negligent due diligence, cultural misalignment, and alleged accounting irregularities. The resolution included years of legal battles, criminal investigations, and HP's eventual split into two companies. For corporate America, the Autonomy disaster became shorthand for acquisition hubris and the dangers of betting billions on unfamiliar territory. The deal was so catastrophic, it claimed multiple executive careers and permanently damaged HP's reputation for sound management. When Daimler-Benz merged with Chrysler in 1998 for $36 billion, it was billed as a marriage made in heaven and a merger of equals. The reality proved far different. German engineering precision collided with American manufacturing pragmatism, creating not synergy but paralysis. Daimler executives viewed Chrysler as inferior, while Chrysler managers resented being treated like colonial subjects. The case demonstrated how cultural incompatibility can destroy value, the reason being a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes cross-border mergers work. The resolution came 9 years later, when Daimler essentially paid Cerberus Capital to take Chrysler off its hands, selling it for just $7.4 billion. This corporate disaster forced future merger architects to prioritize cultural due diligence as much as financial analysis, a lesson that seems to need relearning with each new generation of executives. Sprint's $35 billion acquisition of Nextel in 2005 created a telecommunications disaster of historic proportions. The merged company promised to combine Sprint's traditional cellular network with Nextel's popular push-to-talk service used by construction crews and first responders nationwide. What nobody adequately considered was that the networks used completely different technologies that couldn't be integrated. Sprint customers couldn't talk to Nextel customers despite being on the same carrier. Mass customer defections followed as service quality deteriorated. By 2008, Sprint had written down $29.7 billion of the acquisition value, nearly 85% of the purchase price. This technological incompatibility forced customers to choose between networks, ultimately killing the Nextel brand entirely. The fiasco serves as a reminder that in telecommunications, technical integration matters more than marketing synergies. During the dot-com bubble's frenzied peak, Fiber optic equipment maker JDS Uniphase went on an acquisition bender of historic proportions. Between 1999 and 2001, the company spent over $41 billion acquiring 15 companies at astronomical valuations. When the telecom bubble inevitably burst, demand for fiber optic equipment collapsed overnight. In 2001, JDS Uniphase wrote off an astonishing $56.8 billion in goodwill charges, at the time the largest write-off in corporate history. The case demonstrated how even technically sophisticated companies can succumb to market euphoria. The reason for the failure was simple: paying bubble prices for companies whose value depended on the bubble continuing forever. The resolution forced a complete restructuring of the optical networking industry, with consolidation that continues to this day. Like the Dutch tulip mania centuries earlier, JDSU became the cautionary symbol of an entire era's irrational exuberance. When Bayer acquired Monsanto in 2018 for $63 billion, they weren't just buying a company, they were purchasing a lightning rod. Monsanto, already notorious for its controversial GMO seeds and Roundup weed killer, came with thousands of pending lawsuits alleging its products caused cancer. Bayer's executives, in an extraordinary display of due diligence blindness, underestimated these legal liabilities by roughly $16 billion. The case was simple. A respected German pharmaceutical giant bought America's most hated agricultural company. The reason it imploded was corporate arrogance. Bayer believed it could manage litigation that was already spiraling out of control. The resolution has been brutal for shareholders, with Bayer's market value declining by more than half since the acquisition. This corporate tragedy forces us to ask, did literally no one at Bayer Google Monsanto reputation before wiring $63 billion? The on-again, off-again relationship between CBS and Viacom, spanning the 2000s and 2010s, resembles less a strategic corporate maneuver and more a dysfunctional family drama. Originally one company, they split in 2006, attempted to re-merge multiple times, and finally reunited in 2019 after wasting billions in restructuring costs and strategic confusion. The case centered on media consolidation in a rapidly evolving landscape. The reason for the dysfunction was a power struggle between controlling shareholder Shari Redstone and various executives who opposed her vision. The resolution came only after years of boardroom battles and leadership changes, leaving both companies weaker than their competitors. This corporate soap opera serves as a reminder that family-controlled businesses often make decisions based on factors that have nothing to do with shareholder value, regardless of what the press releases claim. In this hybrid of comedy and commentary, we might observe that CBS and Viacom spent more time negotiating their relationship than actually adapting to the streaming revolution. In 1999, toy giant Mattel purchased educational software maker The Learning Company for $3.8 billion, a move that nearly destroyed the maker of Barbie. The Learning Company had been cobbled together through numerous acquisitions and was experiencing significant returns and revenue recognition issues, problems Mattel's due diligence somehow missed entirely. Within months, The Learning Company was losing $1.5 million daily, dragging down Mattel's entire operation. The case represented a toy manufacturer desperately trying to enter the digital age. The reason for failure was catastrophic due diligence and fundamental misunderstanding of software economics. The resolution came when Mattel essentially gave The Learning Company away just a year later to Gores Technology Group for a mere $27.3 million, less than 1% of the purchase price. Mattel's stock collapsed, its CEO was fired, and the company needed years to recover from this single catastrophic decision. Nortel Networks' acquisition strategy during the 1990s and early 2000s represents perhaps the most complete corporate self-destruction in telecommunications history. The Canadian company spent over $19 billion acquiring dozens of companies, including Bay Networks for $9.1 billion, in a desperate attempt to transform from a traditional telecom equipment maker into an internet powerhouse. When the telecom bubble burst, Nortel's house of cards collapsed spectacularly. The case was a once dominant telecom equipment provider trying to reinvent itself through acquisition. The reason for failure was paying bubble-inflated prices using overvalued stock, combined with accounting irregularities that hid the true financial picture. The resolution was Nortel's complete bankruptcy in 2009, wiping out what had once been Canada's most valuable company. For an entire generation of Canadian investors, Nortel remains shorthand for corporate hubris and catastrophic value destruction. In the spring of 2000, at the absolute peak of dot-com mania, Spanish internet company Terra Networks paid $12.5 billion to acquire web portal Lycos. At the time, Lycos was one of the internet's most popular destinations, competing with Yahoo and AOL. When the internet bubble burst months later, online advertising collapsed, taking Lycos's revenue model with it. Terra held onto the deteriorating asset for 4 painful years before unloading it in 2004 for approximately $95 million, losing over 99% of the original purchase price. The case demonstrated the dangers of buying at the top of a speculative bubble. The reason was a fundamental misunderstanding of sustainable internet business models. The resolution forced Terra's parent company Telefonica to completely rethink its digital strategy. This spectacular failure serves as a reminder that even sound businesses can become terrible investments when purchased at extraordinarily inflated valuations. French water utility. Vivendi's transformation attempt into a global media conglomerate under CEO Jean-Marie Messier in the late 1990s and early 2000s stands as one of Europe's most spectacular corporate disasters. Messier spent over $77 billion acquiring media assets, including Universal Music, Canal+, and stakes in various entertainment companies, financing it all with massive debt. When the tech bubble burst, Vivendi's stock collapsed and its credit rating plummeted, forcing fire sales of newly acquired assets at massive losses. The case centered on a utility company attempting to become an entertainment giant virtually overnight. The reason it failed was megalomaniacal leadership combined with an unsustainable debt structure. The resolution included Messier's firing, emergency asset sales, and eventual restructuring that cost shareholders over $50 billion in value. Messier, once nicknamed J6M for Jean-Marie Messier, moi-même, maître du monde, master of the world, learned that hubris makes a poor business strategy. Time Warner's 1996 acquisition of Turner Broadcasting System for $7.5 billion seemed reasonable at the time. CNN, TBS, and other cable networks complemented Time Warner's existing media portfolio. The trouble came not from the acquisition itself, but from what it enabled later. Loading up on Turner's assets and debt made Time Warner vulnerable to AOL's disastrous takeover offer just 4 years later. The case demonstrated how one acquisition, even a strategically sound one, can set the stage for future disaster. The reason was balance sheet deterioration that made Time Warner receptive to AOL's stock-based offer at precisely the wrong time. The resolution became part of the larger AOL-Time Warner catastrophe, wiping out hundreds of billions in shareholder value. This corporate tragedy shows how business decisions can be correct in isolation, yet contribute to a larger systemic failure, a lesson that media conglomerates continue to relearn with each generation of leadership. It's a hybrid of comedy and commentary to note that Time Warner bought Turner to become stronger, only to make itself an easier target. The failed 2001 merger between Honeywell and General Electric represents one of the rare cases where a blocked deal proved beneficial for the target company. When GE announced its intention to acquire Honeywell for $42 billion, it seemed like industrial conglomerate heaven until European regulators stepped in. The European Commission blocked the merger on antitrust grounds, concerned about GE's dominance in aircraft engines combined with Honeywell's avionics business. The case demonstrated the emerging power of European regulators over American corporate mega-mergers. The reason for the block was fundamentally different antitrust philosophies between US and European authorities. The resolution cost both companies hundreds of millions in advisory fees and lost opportunities. But ironically, Honeywell shareholders were ultimately better off. In the 2 decades since the blocked merger, Honeywell has outperformed GE substantially, as the latter collapsed under mismanagement and unsustainable financial engineering. Xerox's PARC Research Division invented much of modern computing, the graphical user interface, the mouse, Ethernet networking, and then watched other companies profit from its innovations. One of its most painful missed opportunities came in 1999 when Xerox's venture capital arm had early opportunities to acquire Palm's handheld technology for under $100 million but declined. Palm was later spun off and reached a market valuation exceeding $50 billion during the tech boom. The case represented corporate myopia at its finest, a company inventing the future but failing to capitalize on it. The reason was Xerox's inability to see beyond its core copying and printing businesses. The resolution forced a complete rethinking of how research companies commercialize innovations. This corporate tragedy has become standard reading in business schools worldwide, a case study in how even the most innovative companies can fail to profit from their own brilliance when they lack strategic vision. When Apple retail executive Ron Johnson became JCPenney's CEO in 2011, he arrived with a revolutionary vision: transform the struggling department store chain into a hip, Apple-like shopping destination. Johnson eliminated coupons, sales, and clearance racks, staples that JCPenney's price-conscious customers relied upon. He spent billions renovating stores and acquiring new concepts while alienating the company's core customer base. The case was straightforward: a retail executive mistaking JCPenney for Apple. The reason it failed was fundamental misunderstanding of customer psychology. JCPenney shoppers wanted discounts and deals, not a premium experience. The resolution came after sales plummeted 25% in a single year. Johnson was fired after just 17 months, but the damage was done. The company never recovered, eventually filing for bankruptcy in 2020. In a hybrid of comedy and commentary, we might observe that Johnson tried to sell $8 towels to people who specifically came to the store to buy $3.99 towels on clearance. Washington. Mutual's aggressive expansion into subprime lending in the early 2000s represents one of banking's most spectacular self-destructions. The Seattle-based bank, once known for conservative lending practices, acquired multiple subprime lenders including Long Beach Financial for $345 million. These acquisitions fundamentally altered WAMU's risk profile, loading its balance sheet with increasingly toxic mortgage assets. The case demonstrated how acquisition strategy can completely transform a company's risk profile. The reason for failure was the pursuit of growth at any cost, combined with catastrophic risk management. The resolution came in September 2008, when regulators seized WAMU in the largest bank failure in American history. The bank's assets were sold to JPMorgan Chase for a fraction of their previous value, wiping out shareholders entirely. WAMU's collapse serves as a stark reminder that in banking, the quality of your acquisitions matters far more than the quantity. In 2000, Blockbuster CEO John Antioco was presented with an opportunity to acquire a fledgling DVD-by-mail service called Netflix for $50 million. After reviewing the proposal, Blockbuster executives reportedly laughed Netflix's team out of the room, seeing no value in the money-losing startup. This case of corporate blindness ranks among history's greatest missed opportunities. The reason was Blockbuster's inability to recognize how technology would transform content delivery. They were selling retail locations while Netflix was building a technology platform. The resolution proved catastrophically one-sided. Netflix's market value eventually exceeded $200 billion, while Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy in 2010. Its 9,000 stores reduced to a single nostalgic location in Bend, Oregon. This story serves as the ultimate business cautionary tale, reminding executives that dismissing emerging technologies and business models is how market leaders become market failures. Kodak's relationship with digital photography represents perhaps the most tragic corporate irony in business history. The company actually invented the first digital camera in 1975, holding patents critical to the technology's development. Yet instead of embracing this innovation, Kodak systematically underinvested in digital while protecting its highly profitable film business. The case was a market leader actively suppressing its own revolutionary technology. The reason was the classic innovator's dilemma: unwillingness to cannibalize a profitable core business. The resolution came with Kodak's bankruptcy in 2012, by which time the company had missed decades of potential digital market dominance. What makes this case particularly poignant is that Kodak understood exactly what was coming. Their own internal studies predicted digital's inevitable triumph, yet they still failed to adapt. In this analytical reflection with Closing Wit, we must acknowledge that Kodak didn't just miss the future, they invented it, then ran away from it. The 1988 leveraged buyout of RJR Nabisco by private equity firm KKR for $25 billion, equivalent to over $55 billion today, represented the peak of 1980s financial engineering excess. KKR loaded the food and tobacco conglomerate with unprecedented debt, planning to sell off pieces at a profit. The case exemplified the barbarians at the gate era of hostile takeovers. The reason it ultimately destroyed value was the massive debt service costs combined with emerging tobacco litigation risks. The resolution included years of financial maneuvering, eventual breakup, and the realization that excessive leverage can destroy even stable consumer businesses. While KKR eventually recouped its investment, the company itself never regained its former prominence. This landmark deal changed American corporate governance forever, leading to poison pill defenses and making boards far more wary of leveraged buyout proposals. In an analytical reflection with Closing Wit, we might note that loading a cigarette company with debt is like giving a lung cancer patient a second job as a coal miner. When energy trading giant Enron acquired UK water utility Wessex Water in 1998 for $2.2 billion, it seemed like a strange match. What did an aggressive American trading company want with a staid British water utility? The acquisition formed the centerpiece of Enron's water business, which the company claimed would revolutionize water delivery globally. In reality, the purchase was part of Enron's strategy to acquire hard assets that could be used in complex financial transactions to hide debt and inflate profits. The case revealed how acquisitions can be used to facilitate accounting fraud. The reason it failed was Enron's fundamentally unsustainable business model. The resolution came with Enron's spectacular collapse in 2001, which rendered the Wessex acquisition completely worthless to shareholders. This corporate disaster demonstrated how international acquisitions can serve as vehicles for financial manipulation when regulatory oversight fails across borders. WorldCom's acquisition spree in the 1990s under CEO Bernie Ebbers transformed a small Mississippi long-distance provider into a telecommunications giant. The company spent over $70 billion acquiring 65 companies, including the $37 billion purchase of MCI in 1998. To hide the enormous costs of integrating these acquisitions and maintain WorldCom's stock price, executives engaged in massive accounting fraud, improperly capitalizing over $11 billion in operating expenses. The case showed how acquisition-driven growth can mask underlying financial problems. The reason the strategy failed was that telecommunications was becoming a commodity business, making it impossible to generate returns on the inflated purchase prices. The resolution came with WorldCom's bankruptcy in 2002, at the time the largest in American history, and prison sentences for Ebbers and his CFO. This spectacular implosion demonstrated how acquisitions can become addiction, with each deal requiring a larger one to maintain the illusion of growth. The late 1990s pet supply website boom represents a perfect case study in collective investment delusion. Venture capital firms and corporations poured over $300 million into pet supply websites like Pets.com, Petstore.com, and others, convinced that people would pay shipping costs to have heavy bags of dog food delivered to their homes. The case highlighted how investment frenzies can override basic business logic. The reason these ventures failed was fundamentally unsustainable unit economics. Customer acquisition costs far exceeded customer lifetime value. The resolution came when all these companies collapsed within 2 years, with Pets.com becoming the iconic symbol of dot-com-era excess. Its sock puppet mascot appeared in a $1.2 million Super Bowl commercial in January 2000, and by November, the company had liquidated. This analytical reflection with closing wit reminds us that sometimes the business model is the dog, and the cute mascot is just the tail, desperately wagging it. Under CEO Dennis Kozlowski, industrial conglomerate Tyco International spent over $60 billion in the 1990s and early 2000s, acquiring hundreds of companies across disparate industries. The acquisition strategy was so aggressive that Tyco often closed a new deal weekly, leaving little time for proper integration or accounting scrutiny. The case revealed how acquisition frenzies can mask executive misconduct. The reason for failure was Kozlowski's use of Tyco as a personal piggy bank, famously spending $6,000 of company money on a shower curtain and $2 million on a birthday party for his wife. The resolution included Kozlowski's criminal conviction for looting the company, massive write-downs of acquisition values, and Tyco's eventual breakup into multiple companies. This corporate tragedy demonstrated how unchecked acquisition sprees can create perfect conditions for fraud by making financial statements so complex that even sophisticated investors struggle to understand the underlying business reality. Adelphia Communications, once America's sixth-largest cable provider, pursued an aggressive acquisition strategy throughout the 1990s under the leadership of founder John Regas and his sons. The family-controlled company spent over $18 billion acquiring smaller cable systems nationwide, financing these purchases with enormous debt that was often hidden from investors through complex accounting. The case exemplified the dangers of family control combined with rapid expansion. The reason it imploded was the Regas family's use of Adelphia as a personal lending facility, borrowing over $2.3 billion for private ventures without board's approval. The resolution came with bankruptcy in 2002 and criminal convictions for the Regas family. This spectacular collapse forced the cable industry to improve corporate governance practices and highlighted the risks of allowing founding families to maintain control without adequate oversight. In this analytical reflection with closing wit, we observe that the Regases built an empire of 5.7 million cable subscribers, yet somehow never got the channel that explains securities fraud laws. Global Crossing's attempt to build a worldwide fiber optic network in the late 1990s stands as one of telecommunications' greatest financial disasters. The company raised over $20 billion to construct and acquire a network spanning 4 continents, connecting 27 countries with 100,000 miles of fiber optic cable. When the telecom bubble burst, it revealed massive overcapacity. The industry had built enough fiber to handle 3,000 times the existing internet traffic. The case demonstrated the dangers of extrapolating exponential growth indefinitely. The reason for failure was fundamental misalignment between supply and demand, combined with questionable accounting practices. The resolution came in January 2002 when Global Crossing filed for bankruptcy with $12.4 billion in debt. Its network, which cost over $15 billion to build, was ultimately sold for just $405 million. This analytical reflection with closing wit reminds us that the information superhighway, like real highways, can suffer from overbuilding. Except you can't repurpose fiber optic cables as bicycle paths. Financial services company Conseco's acquisition binge throughout the 1990s transformed a modest insurance company into a financial services giant seemingly overnight. Under CEO Stephen Hilbert, Conseco acquired over 30 insurance companies for more than $20 billion, including the disastrous 1998 purchase of mobile home lender Greentree Financial for $7.6 billion. The case illustrated how acquisition addiction can blind executives to fundamental business risks. The reason for failure was Greentree's subprime lending exposure combined with accounting practices that front-loaded profits and delayed loss recognition. The resolution came with Conseco's bankruptcy in 2002, at the time the third largest in American history. Hilbert, who once earned $119 million in a single year, lost his fortune and his 25,000-square-foot mansion. This analytical reflection with closing wit demonstrates that in finance, as in architecture, building too high without a proper foundation inevitably leads to collapse. At the peak of the telecom bubble, Canadian company 360 Networks raised over $2 billion to build a global fiber optic network through acquisitions and construction. The company went public in 2000, reached a market capitalization exceeding $13 billion, and began an ambitious expansion that would have connected North America, Europe, South America, and Asia with high-capacity data lines. When the telecom bubble burst, 360 Networks found itself with partially completed infrastructure, massive debt, and rapidly declining demand. The case exemplified how market euphoria can drive unsustainable capital expenditures. The reason for failure was the fundamental mismatch between supply and demand in telecommunications infrastructure. The resolution came with 360 Networks' bankruptcy in 2001. With the network selling for pennies on the dollar. This analytical reflection with closing wit reminds us that the business graveyard is filled with companies that confused, if we build it, they will come, with an actual business strategy. So that wraps up our journey through the bizarre world of billionaire business blunders. From AOL's catastrophic Time Warner merger to Blockbuster's fateful Netflix rejection, these colossal mistakes prove that even unlimited resources can't buy good judgment. But now it's your turn. What do you think? Are these financial failures just bad timing, or evidence that wealth often clouds decision-making? Did we miss any epic business disasters that deserve mention? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'll pin the most insightful ones. If you enjoyed this deep dive into business failures, prove it. Hit subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss our next exploration of billionaire psychology.